even reaching the benchmark of plausibility is a very high standard in the world. You must be doing something horrible.
And after hearing South Africa's case against Israel, they ended up ruling that Israel is plausibly committing genocide.
So it's not that hard, it seems, to cross that threshold, or at least not as hard as people would make it out to be. This ICJ decision, as some commentators did say, I think I said as well, was not really a victory for anyone. Legal stuff is complicated anyway, but people, they just hear whatever they want. And yes, I will both sides this. You're all annoying. I hate you. Do you guys remember that time when the ICJ accused Israel of committing a plausible genocide, or being plausibly guilty of committing genocide? I don't, because they didn't say that. Let's explain. Okay, so South Africa, in about a few months ago, January-ish, takes Israel to the ICJ, accusing them of committing genocide in Gaza, calls for, among other things, a ceasefire and other various provisional measures. The court gives an initial ruling, which a lot of people didn't seem to understand. There's been this widespread interpretation that what the ICJ said was that they found the accusation of genocide to be plausible. They said that Israel is plausibly committing a genocide. This is the claim that went around. People would talk about plausible genocide when they cite the court. But some people noticed that that's not actually what they said. There's not actually any direct mention of plausible genocide. Now, what they did say was, this is where we get into the weird legal stuff, they said, at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa for which it is seeking protection are plausible. Now, what does that mean? It means quite a few things. A few of them are formalities. One is that it means that Palestinians are a national group that have a right to be protected under the Genocide Convention. Because for the Genocide Convention, it's the destruction of a racial, national, or ethnical group, right? So Palestinians are a national group. They fall under the Genocide Convention. That's confirmed. Unlike, for example, gamers or horses, okay? So the second one is that South Africa has a right to bring this case to the court. The slightly more colorful one is that they said that there was what was called a risk of irreparable prejudice and urgency. So what this means is that some of the rights, they haven't said which ones, but you can guess, the right to not be genocided, that there's risk of irreparable prejudice and urgency under the Genocide Convention, which means they're not saying that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. They're saying that there is a risk that acts will be committed that will be genocidal. There's a risk. So they haven't said anything about the merits. They haven't said anything about whether or not South Africa has a well-founded case. They haven't said anything about whether or not that 84-page document is a good enough case for genocide. They haven't said anything like that. They've just said that the rights raised are plausible, some of them. They gave out different provisional measures from what South Africa asked for. They didn't go for a ceasefire. They did call for improving humanitarian aid. They called for Israel to effectively prosecute people who are inciting genocide. That's one thing that they did. And they also acknowledged that some of the quotes, some of the statements from Israeli officials could plausibly constitute genocidal intent. Now, as we're about to find out, plausibly is a low legal standard. It is not a very high threshold to cross. A very simple reason for that is that people can make very inflammatory statements on a war and it not be genocide. Think the Arabs in 1948. The Arab leaders in 1948 said very inflammatory stuff about massacres akin to the Crusades and the Mongols. They spoke about total war and killing anyone in sight. They spoke about that. But if you look at how the actual armies operated and what they were trying to do on the ground, and a little bit from captured documentation, it doesn't seem to be like any of them actually had a genocidal plan. It seemed to be like they all had very different goals, really. Lebanon wanted to do not that much at all. They captured like one village. Syria didn't seem to do that much. Egypt clearly just wanted territory. Jordan clearly just wanted territory. And also Jordan, it turns out, kind of wanted to avoid fighting the Zionists for the most part. So that's one side of it. You can have insanely inflammatory quotes, but not a genocidal plan actually be in place. And on the other end, you can have very ambiguous, unassuming quotes that are actually calls to genocide. Think Rwanda cut down the tall trees. That's a euphemism. A euphemism can be a call to genocide, though. So it makes sense that there is a low threshold for the quotes. So this is the statement from the court. The court is saying that South Africa has a right to bring this case. Palestinians have a right to protection, to not be genocided, because they're a national group. And some of the statements, and also because there's a war, because people are dying, there is a risk that the Genocide Convention might be crossed. It might get crossed at some point. So that's where they left it in January. But obviously, because it's legal terminology, people translated that into Israel is plausibly committing genocide. And obviously, the meaning of the word plausibly, people just, I guess, some people with political leanings decided to assume that plausible actually is a high standard, is a high threshold, that it basically means that something really bad is happening and it seems quite likely that they already agree with it, that they just need to go through the formal process. But just the other day, the lady who was president of the ICJ at the time of the provisional measures being read out, she's actually the one who read out the measures. She issued the provisional measures in January. I think she's now the former president, so she's talking on the BBC about this plausible genocide claim, and this is what she says.
Would it be fair to say, and I'm no lawyer, and many people watching and listening will not be lawyers, but would it be fair to say that the key point that you made your initial order and ruling upon was whether or not there was a plausible case that should be taken on by the court of genocide in the case of Israel's actions in Gaza after October 7, and you quite clearly decided that there was a plausible case? Is it right to say that's at the heart of what you decided?
You know, I'm glad I have a chance to address that, because the court's test for deciding whether to impose measures uses the idea of plausibility, but the test is the plausibility of the rights that are asserted by the applicant, in this case, South Africa. So the court decided that the Palestinians had a plausible right to be protected from genocide, and that South Africa had the right to present that claim in the court. It then looked at the facts as well, but it did not decide, and this is something where I'm correcting what's often said in the media, it didn't decide that the claim of genocide was plausible. It did emphasize in the order that there was a risk of irreparable harm to the Palestinian right to be protected from genocide. But the shorthand that often appears, which is that there's a plausible case of genocide, isn't what the court decided.
Now, you might be thinking, if you are a little bit loose with your interpretation of language, especially in a legal context, you might think, well, a risk of irreparable harm, or a risk of irreparable harm under the Genocide Convention, well, so it's not a plausible genocide, but there's an immediate risk of people being genocided. Are these different? Turns out they actually are quite different. And we know that because one of the judges, Judge Nolte, wrote an addendum to the first issuance of provisional measures. This person voted in favor of every provisional measure, by the way, every single one, Judge Nolte. So he's not a dissenting lawyer in this one, anyway. And he holds two of these positions at the same time, which I guess if you're not sure which each of these terms means would sound contradictory, but they're not. So the first thing he says is, where is it? He says here, my decision to vote in favor of the measures indicated rests on the plausible claim by South Africa that certain statements by Israeli state officials, including members of its military, give rise to a real and imminent risk of irreparable prejudice to the rights of Palestinians under the Genocide Convention. So again, what he's saying is that the quotes from state officials, from certain state officials, give rise to a real and imminent risk of irreparable prejudice. He's saying that's plausible, okay? But he also said in the exact same document that I am not persuaded that South Africa has plausibly shown that the military operation undertaken by Israel as such is being pursued with genocidal intent. So he holds so that's what I mean by plausible genocide is not the same as it's plausible that there is immediate risk of irreparable harm, right? This is legal language to you. So he's rejecting the idea that it's even plausible, at least according to South Africa's evidence, that Israel's attack on Gaza is being pursued with genocidal intent, right? But then at the same time, he's also saying that it's plausible that there is a real and immediate risk of irreparable prejudice, a real and imminent risk. Again, because legal language is confusing, but he's saying the statements are raising the chance, like the non-zero chance that genocide can happen, but he doesn't seem to think that it's happening right now, that it's being pursued with genocidal intent. That's like the gist of what he's saying. And when it talks about plausible, there's also worth acknowledging that plausibility is a low standard. It's a low legal standard for the reasons that I laid out. This person, I think here, even lays it out based on previous case law with Gambia, Myanmar. So, since Judge Kress made his declaration in Gambia v. Myanmar, the court has provided more guidance on how to assess plausibility. 3 final observations can be offered. First, the court has shown flexibility, particularly when it was faced with obligations of erga omnes partes, characters such as genocide, torture, and racial discrimination. In his declaration, Judge Kress questioned the argument that the court should apply a stricter plausibility standard at the provisional measures phase in cases of allegations of exceptional gravity. He wondered in this context whether the protective function of provisional measures does in fact not point in the opposite direction, precisely because fundamental values are at stake. He highlighted that, in the end, the court has applied a low plausibility standard with respect to the question of genocidal intent. Okay, so this is an important point to retain. So it's not that hard, it seems, to cross that threshold, or at least not as hard as people would make it out to be. Which is why this ICJ decision, as some commentators did say, I think I said as well, was not really a victory for anyone. It wasn't a victory for the Palestinians because they didn't get the ceasefire. They're still dying. It wasn't a victory for South Africa because they didn't get their exact requests met out. And it wasn't a victory for Israel because they just wanted the case to get thrown out immediately. Could you still criticize Israel for allowing a situation that has a risk of genocide? If Israel, so Israel claimed that they are successfully prosecuting people who have incited genocide. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I feel like some of their politicians should come under that as well. So you can. If they're not effectively, if they're not being careful with their rhetoric, knowing full well that there are highly emotional soldiers on the ground who might take those words as a green light to do violations of humanitarian law, which has been done, right? And day 2, we know that there was the cutting off the water. That is a clear violation of IHL. One of those 3 pipes stayed off for 6 months. It was only switched on just like a few weeks ago. So yeah, but that's the problem, is that people take something and they amplify it and editorialize it to a point that they're just spreading disinformation, right? So let's look at how much it just spread like wildfire. First of all, this was me in the 16th of March, I think. This is what my impression was then. Also, again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they've ever used the words Israel is plausibly committing genocide. I think what they actually said was that some of the rights raised by South Africa are plausible, but they didn't actually say which rights, whether it's like, the right to pursue the case, or the rights that Palestinians have a right to not be genocided, and those rights might be in danger. We don't know because there's a war happening. That 1 or 2 of the quotes might plausibly be indicative of genocidal intent, but again, but I don't think they said that anything about Israel plausibly committing the act. I don't think they said that, but wow, well done, Loaderbox. Wow, well done. Good job, bro. All right, anyway. I also don't really blame that many people for holding on to this, because it wasn't just pundits and partisans who did this. It was the mainstream media did this. The NPR had this. Yeah, this is just like from Penn Global or something, like the court found it is plausible that Israel's actions amount to genocide. So that's not true. The judge has spoken against that. I think it was this one, wasn't it? There was what happened there? What? Where's my article? Where's my hyperlink? Oh, okay. Wow. Here. The International Court of Justice ordered Israel to ensure its military does not take actions to violate the Genocide Convention. Yeah, NPR. ICJ says it's plausible Israel committed genocide in Gaza. Again, they didn't say that. But this is one of their articles. They say Gaza genocide is plausible. NPR. Everyone trusts NPR. I trust NPR. But obviously, people who we're going to call this a genocide regardless of what any scholars said, frankly, decided to just run with this. And you can even see, once you know the context, the way that these guys start to repackage and slightly shift the language of what the court said, the way that they're just capitalizing on it so transparently is like really, really interesting to me. So this is Muin Rabbani using it.
The judges, in an overwhelming majority, came to the conclusion that the evidence submitted by South Africa to the International Court of Justice was sufficiently overwhelming, sufficiently convincing, and that the rebuttal presented by Israel was sufficiently weak that it decided South Africa's accusations of genocide against Israel are plausible and are deserved.
Yeah, so overwhelming. I've noticed Rabbani do this a few times, is he sometimes just squeezes in the word overwhelming to make something that's not overwhelming sound more powerful. He said that about Kress and the statements as well. But yeah, again, this is just like a complete miswording of what the court said. And again, it's also, we're going from a plausibility, which is a low standard. Even if they said it's plausible Israel's committing genocide, even if they'd said that, plausible is still a low standard. But they didn't say that. So anyway, Norman Finkelstein, his understanding of plausible.
It's organized by Satan. Let's start
Satan,
with
yeah.
Hamas.
Okay,
No,
Satan.
yeah.
I agree. Let's go for the big one. The big Megillah. It's Satan. Okay?
Is this the right clip?
Overwhelmingly organized, overwhelmingly nonviolent.
Wait,
Resembled at the beginning the first,
bombs
here and
the
there,
first Intifada.
they threw
Represent the
bombs here and
first,
there, yeah.
okay, not bombs. But
They
let's-
tried to make
okay.
holes in the fence.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I'm an absolute moron. Why did I clip the wrong part? Oh no. It's I can find it easily enough because he says Olympic, right? Well done, Loanerbox. Shithead. How did that happen? Olympic. Okay. This is where he said it, 316-ish. We'll go from earlier on because Finkelstein attaches a lot of weight to his words, okay?
that was 84 pages. It was single.
Even 84
It was
pages can be
single-spaced.
frivolous.
It
It
was
takes an
sing-
hour and a half
it
to
was
read. It
single-
was not a
it-
massive case.
It was single spaced, and it had literally hundreds of footnotes.
It can still be frivolous.
It's
Of course,
possible.
of course,
it
but
could
this
be.
one wasn't.
Yeah, I read the report. To tell you the truth, I followed very closely everything that's been happening to October 7th. I was mesmerized. I couldn't believe the comprehensiveness of that particular report. Number two, there are two quite respected judges, there were two quite respected experts of international law sitting on the South African panel, John Dugard and Vaughan Lowe. Vaughan Lowe, as you might know, he argued the Wool case in 2004 before the International Court of Justice. Now, they were alleging genocide, which in their view means the evidence in their minds, we're not yet at the court, the evidence in their minds compels the conclusion that genocide is being committed. I am willing, because I happen to know Mr. Dugard personally and have corresponded with Vaughan Lowe. I've heard their claim. I've read the report. I would say they make a very strong case. But let's agree plausible. Now, here's a question. If somebody qualifies for an Olympic team, let's say a regional person qualifies for an Olympic team, it doesn't mean they're going to be on the Olympic team. It doesn't mean they're going to win a gold medal, a silver medal, or a bronze
But
medal.
they can swim, that's what you're saying.
No, I would say that's a very high bar.
You're saying they can swim.
to even qualify.
Swim well enough to have a realistic prospect of
got
winning
that.
a medal.
So, to even make it to plausible.
That is
It's a
not
high
true.
bar.
to even-
That is not
it's
what
a
plausible
very
means.
high-
It is absolutely not. You're
Mr.
dead
Borelli,
wrong.
Mr. Borelli, please don't teach me about the English language.
So the declaration of Judge
I
Noy
said
says that the court
plausibility
is not
is the
asked
same
in the present
concept as
phase.
qualifying.
The court is not asked at this present phase of the proceedings to determine whether South Africa's allegations of genocide
Didn't I
are
just
well-founded. They're not
Didn't I just say
well-founded. They're not
that?
even well-founded.
Did
The court isn't. You said that plausible was a high standard. It is absolutely not. It is a misrepresentation of the strength of the case against Israel, just like the majority of the quotes they have in this case.
Okay, whatever. So then, when asked, because again, that's not what I read, right? They said plausibility is a low standard. It's not like qualifying for an Olympic team. If you're qualifying for an Olympic team, you're like way up there in terms of swimmers or whatever they thought. All right. So when asked why he believes that, why he believes that analogy, he says this.
I read Aaron Barak's declaration.
Then why are you lying and saying plausible is a high standard?
Because I said even reaching the benchmark of plausibility is a very high standard in the world. It's the equivalent of a regional player qualifying for an Olympics. It's still 2 steps removed. You may not be on the team and you may not get a medal, but to get qualified, which in this context is the equivalent of plausible, you must be doing something pretty horrible. And as it happened,
again, that's because I said so. He just repeated the same analogy. It's like, how do you get away with that? The appeal to authority, only the authority is yourself from 2 minutes ago. Okay. Interesting. Owen Jones got a lot of mileage out of this. I don't know why someone decided to put my fucking face with the police department thing here, but Owen Jones got a lot of mileage out of this plausible stuff. Finkelstein there, plausibly committing genocide. State committing genocide is plausible. Plausible case of Israel committing genocide. Plausible risk that Israel's committing genocide. Oh, the risk one's closer. Okay. Claims are plausible. Claims of genocide are plausible. Again, even like one of the judges who voted for every provisional measure explicitly said he didn't believe that, but okay. Claims against Israel are plausible. The genocide, which the highest court on earth declared as plausible. Plausible chance that Israel's committing genocide. Yeah, all these are all just false. These are all just misrepresentations of what the court said. Mehdi Hassan was there on it. The world's top court called the genocide in Gaza plausible. ICJ said plausibly committing genocide. Could plausibly be committing genocide. The ICJ judges, they said Israel could be. Again, that's not quite, yeah. There are a lot of these. This guy, Kenneth Roth, he went pretty hard with it, actually. Look at that. Plausible genocide, plausible genocide, plausible genocide, plausible acts of genocide, plausible genocide. This guy is, ironically, he's a former Human Rights Watch executive director, 1993 to 2022. And now he's a visiting professor at SPIA. Plausible genocide. Talking about learning lessons from Rwanda. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur. ICJ just recognized that the horror in Gaza is plausibly constitutes genocide. I guess for good measure, why not? Noah Samson.
This document and application
Actually, this is good because this is the clip that made me look into it.
Pretty unprecedented. The ICJ is the UN's highest court. It's the world court, basically. And after hearing South Africa's case against Israel, they ended up ruling that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. They fell short
I don't even blame him. He's just using the NPR article.
Calling for a ceasefire, but they did order Israel is plausibly committing genocide. They fell short of calling for a ceasefire, but they did order, with near unanimous approval, that Israel must halt any actions in Gaza that could constitute genocide, which, according to the ICJ, they are currently plausibly undertaking. There is no evidence that Israel has changed anything about their rhetoric or military strategy in the months since this ruling, so, by the court's logic, the final verdict should be obvious, but unfortunately...
And then obviously when you take that and you run with it, I don't know how he got to the conclusion that the final verdict should be obvious already based on the first ruling.
No evidence that Israel has changed anything about their rhetoric or military strategy in the months since this ruling. So, by the court's logic, the final verdict should be obvious, but unfortunately, we likely won't see that conclusion for at least another few years, because we live in hell.
It's probably one of the most incoherent pieces of like prop logic. I feel like if you laid that out, it would just make your head spin. Anyway. So obviously, some people are coping and just saying that risk of irreparable harm equals they're plausibly committing genocide. However, there's another problem as well. My tweet got a bunch of reposts yesterday of that statement. And now the problem is that a bunch of shitting hardline Zionists have decided that they think the final verdict now is that there's no genocide. But they're not saying that either. Let's give you one example. There's so many of these from both sides, but But where's just one example? I can just go through this. Super finicky. This is blood libel. Okay, again, the trial is still ongoing. They're still investigating. They're not even at the stage yet of assessing whether or not South Africa's case is well-founded. They're not even at the stage of the merits. See, like, there's not a genocide. Like, people are doing this now as well. And I'm just like, how can a court can make a statement, which is admittedly a bit difficult to understand, and you have to do a bit of reading to figure out what they're meaning. It doesn't help that the media fell for it as well. But now that there's clarification, and people are taking it to go the other way and saying, case closed, no genocide. Like, not at all. Like, that's not what they're saying either. They might still very well rule it to be a genocide. Like, I don't think it's very likely. But if things change, they might, because the war's still ongoing. You know, a war can happen, and then there can be an act of genocide, like, right at the end, you know? It's just, this person's got the right answer. I don't know why y'all cared about these institutions. They're all agendas of the empire. Yeah, we know that the people saying plausible genocide don't actually care about what the ICJ says, for the most part. Some of them probably do. Stop calling this shit a genocide and focus on the real issues. I don't know. Legal stuff is complicated anyway, but the problem is just that people just hear whatever they want. They just hear whatever they want. And yes, I will both sides this. You're all annoying. I hate you. Okay? Come on. Like, there are literally people spamming every... There are some... I saw some of these quote tweets was literally just like one or two people just spamming like 20 different accounts. No genocide. Keep lying. Like, bro, that's not... You're investing too much the wrong way now. There is no genocide. It's a fucking with this person's source, ICJ. Again, they did not say there is no genocide. Oh, God. Nina Turner. What did she actually say? The ICJ called a plausible... Okay, it's okay to correct this because they didn't call it that. Okay. Whew. It's difficult out there, guys. It's very difficult. But we got that clarity. Also, I will say, I don't even know. This doesn't take away from the fact that, I mean, I said this. I believe that Israel has committed violations of IHL. They did it like on day 2 of the war, at least. What the question I would have to ask, though, is how normal is it for, even if she's the former president now, so I guess someone else will be giving provisional measures next time, or giving the next stage, or reading out whatever the next stage is, or the next orders. But how normal is it for in an ongoing case, for one of the president who was literally giving out the orders to go on the media and talk about the case? Is that normal? I mean, maybe she cleared up some confusion around the plausible genocide thing, but I feel like there would be a better way to do that. Apparently, in the rest of this interview, I only saw little bits of it, but apparently in the rest of this interview, she just kept on saying that she's not comfortable asking this question. I'm not comfortable asking this question. Almost like she's trying to temper expectations. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think they're going to rule it as a genocide. I've been wrong in the past. If more evidence comes out and it looks like there are proper, like, genocidal, like those mass graves, one thing that would easily change my mind on whether or not this is a genocide is they're saying that some of these people in these mass graves have been found stripped and
something where I'm correcting
bound.
What's often said.
Stripped and with their hands bound, right? And I'm like, okay, that suggests many, many things. It suggests very likely instances of abuse, quite possibly even sexual abuse. It also implies people are being killed after they're surrendering if they're killed with their hands bound. So if it turns out that in an Israeli operation, some troop or some unit was actually completing a mission and then after people had surrendered, binding their hands and then shooting them anyway, and if they've done that, whether it's from a commander or a general or something, with the intent of just killing Palestinians for its own sake, like with that actual intent, like Srebrenica style, that would be genocide. That would be or at least a very strong case for one. So we'll see. But based on what we have right now, unless more comes out about that mass grave stuff, there's more clarity or more investigation, then yeah, I don't really, at least at this stage, when these orders were issued out, I don't think the evidence for a genocide was there, but who knows, might change. But that's where we are now. Surely a commander could have breached orders. Yeah, the problem is, though, I don't really know if a commander breaching orders counts as a genocide. I think there needs to be a level of command, either from a state or a military. I don't know which level of the military it has to be, but I don't think I don't think I've ever seen a genocide where it's just troops disobeying orders and killing people post-surrender. I don't think that people don't call Deir Yassin a genocide, right? They call it a massacre or a crime against humanity or something like that. There's like a different crime, different category. And also your Dolo Specialis and all that shit anyway. Oh, what a ride. I mean, at the very least, we've learned a little bit about international law, so that's the best we can do in these trying times. Surely Hamas has an incentive to stage atrocities. They might, but people also have an incentive to kill civilians. Like how many people in the IDF know someone who died on October 7th? Like, do you don't think there are people down there who don't really see a difference between Hamas and civilians? Some IDF guy even said that. He even said that there are people, not a majority, he said, but he did say that there are quite a lot of people there who don't see a difference. And whether or not they're acting on that or whether they're ordered to act on that assumption, we don't know. But if you're pissing in the wind, if you think there are not soldiers there who are just out for revenge and are willing to do it, even if they're not told to by anyone. Yeah, yeah. I think there's basically no chance that hasn't happened already. You're doing the just asking questions thing. I'm sorry, but if you've just watched the amount of capitalizing on false information from all these various pundits, and I'm the one apparently just asking questions. Which questions am I just asking? I've been very clear on every single position I have on this particular issue. What the f*** are you talking about? Just asking questions. Which conclusion do you think I'm not committing to? You know what just asking questions means, right? Just asking questions is like, how do we know 6 million Jews really died in the Holocaust? And then they're like, they've never looked it up. They've never really checked about whether it was archives or German documents or census data or anything. They don't know any of that. They're just asking questions, and they're not really asking any questions. They're not curious. They're just saying it because they think the Holocaust was fake. That's just asking questions. It's because they're sea lining. They're giving questions. They're feigning curiosity to ease in a belief that they don't want to commit to publicly or explicitly. Which belief am I not explicitly committing to? It seems you downplaying Israeli crimes, though. I know it seems that way. And I'm really sorry that the internet did that, where people will do this thing where they will use the most excessive, inflammatory, regardless of how inaccurate it is, language to describe everything about a particular issue. And then if you say, it's actually not that, it's more like this probably, then you're accused of downplaying. I'm sorry that the world works like that. I'm sorry that there are clear violations of IHL, like unambiguous, like you can see them saying, we're turning off the water. You can see the water pipes are turned off. And you can see, IHL section 55C cunt, whatever. You shouldn't cut off water to a civilian population, even if they're the civilian population of an enemy military. Like, yeah, that's clear. That's a clear violation. As for the Genocide Convention, probably the hardest crime in the entire planet to prove, based on the fact that there's a war and people are dying, and because of some quotes from leaders, like, yeah, I'm sorry, that's not downplaying. It's not downplaying. It's like, this is the world I feel like I'm in right now, is someone is out here, like, Harvey Weinstein murdered 20 women. And I'm like, did he murder them? I thought he sexually assaulted them, right? I thought he abused them and raped them. And then they're like, oh, are you downplaying the violence of Harvey Weinstein? No, you fucking asshole. I'm just saying what actually happened, cunt. Like that's more like, that's the world that we live in now, unfortunately, with this situation. But, you know, I can't believe for all his sanctimony on the road, Ben Gvir got into a car crash. Apparently he's like lightly injured, okay? He's not going to die or anything. There's a dash cam. No way there's a dash cam. What? His daughter is severely injured though. Oh no. Where's the dash cam? What? I didn't know there was dash cam. Are there not? Am I making this up in my... I thought there were these viral clips of Ben Gvir literally road raging at people. Doesn't he encourage his drivers to go to break speed limits and shit? Does he not get in trouble for that? Doesn't he do like road rage stuff? He's been filmed? Or is that over different stuff? Over like traffic disputes and shit? He ran a red light. Yeah, I thought he was like a... I thought he just kind of... I thought he breaks speed limits and runs red lights and shit. Yeah. So, yeah. Is it this one? Ben Gvir? Caught in road rage? What? No, that's not that. Israeli minister chased on road by own security after shouting at them.
אני בדרכי הולך, לא ממצמץ, לא מתקפל, ממשיך לומר את הדברים שכואבים לישראלים.
אני חושב שברור לגמרי
Okay, whatever, I don't care about this. Where's the road rage? Oh, this music, it's going so hard. Ooh. A dramatic car chase. Isn't this guy like the Minister of Police and Security or something? Bro. He's just a bad man. He's just a very, very bad man. Bendolf Gvitler. Dramatic car chase. This was only in February the 5th, okay. Oh well. He's applying that iron wall policy to his fucking rules of the road. Brilliant. Bet he was bullied in school for sure, or he was the bully. Don't forget that. Wait, we're not done yet. That's his security guard. He looks like one of the Fauda characters, no? The guy who... Well, I can't say because it's a spoiler. The guy with the surgery, right? Sneeko. Skips leg day. Bro, he skips every day. The only day he doesn't skip, apparently, is gun day. He's not the security guard. What, is he just he's just an off-duty guy with a gun. Okay. Normal. Why am I getting my news from Twitter? God.